the CPU and the RAM. This reductive description of computer hardware really does apply to really any kind of computer. So we often make a distinction between a computer which we call a client or sometimes a workstation and a computer which we call a server. A client or workstation is really just a machine that an individual works at, whereas a server is typically some system that's put in the back room and it's used to respond to requests from the network. A web server, say, is just a computer that's being used to listen for requests for web pages, and when it gets the request it sends the response. There's no hard and fast distinction in the hardware itself between a system we would call a server and a system we would call a client or workstation. Really, the only differences stem from the fact that with a client machine versus a server, you have different performance needs. And so, say, a server often really needs to have a lot of RAM, so typically a server system will have more RAM than a typical client. Aside from that, client and server hardware are really just some combination of a CPU, system memory, and I/O devices. The same really can be said about what we call handheld systems and embedded systems. Today, for instance, there are some smartphones on the market, like the iPhone, which are mostly made out of components that are pretty much what we were using in PCs just a few years ago. If there's a fundamental difference